Hello, my friends. Really excited to introduce to you guys. You probably don't need to be introduced. You probably already know him, but I'm here with my friend Miguel Conner of Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. He's also the host of the show Finding Hermes. And another thing, Miguel, did you were previously affiliated with something called Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis? Is that what it was called? Oh, Miguel, you muted yourself. Yeah.
I know I'm so good. I'm thinking I'm the guest. I'm the host of something. Force I have it. Yeah, I was a host of that was the name of the podcast before I changed it to Aeon Byte. So it
Good
was the
stuff.
same
Good stuff.
topic. It was just periodical. It was yeah, but same
Cool, man.
topics.
Well, welcome and happy new year. It's kind of funny. I just for some reason that phrase coffee, cigarettes, and gnosis came up because I was like, I remember you saying that. I just don't remember what that actually was, but I appreciate you coming back on, man. I was really excited that you invited me on to come and speak about Dante's Inferno, and I had a really awesome time chatting about that. And I still laugh to myself occasionally about how Dante was canceled, like he was like a victim of cancel culture. And it's something maybe we can circle back on and talk about, perhaps with Christ or with Socrates or anyone else in that kind of boat. But ritual first question for first time guest Miguel. If you think back to any point in your personal journey, when did you start to speak your truth?
Oh, I don't think there's really an answer to that. I think it continues. Sometimes I like to think, when did I sell out? Because there was times in my life where I was like, I got it. I'm on my road. And
Mm,
what derailed me? And then something could derail me in the future. That's the key. What's coming at you around the corner so you'll sell out to a job or an ideology or play it safe? That's what worries me. I think in a normal state, I'm definitely a searcher like you are, like your listeners are, and we're just let us play in the grass or let us play in the
mm.
fields. But then those forces come and they create illusions and lies around us. So I think that's what worries more is what derailed me and why did I let it happen.
Mm. Well said. You just reminded me of this story that Alan Watts likes to relate quite a bit, or he liked to tell in his lectures. It's like if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him because he's not the real Buddha. Anyone who claims to have finished their quest for truth is just lying through their teeth. So it's cool. You reminded me of just the idea. It's we're all seekers here, and that's the fun part is that we're gonna wake up tomorrow and we're gonna have a billion other questions that can be answered, and more and more.
Yeah, it's like I say on my show, and I don't remember who originally quoted it because it's the internet. It's run with those searching for the truth and avoid those who have found it.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yep. Lao Tzu, those who know don't speak. Right on, man. Well, let's start with your main show. But first of all, your website, is it thegodabovegod.com?
yeah, that is my internet homepage, and that
Nice.
has all the stuff, podcasts, videos, articles, all the stuff you need if you want to learn about Gnosticism and Hermeticism and myself and all that good stuff. But obviously, like everybody else, I'm spread out on the internet in different channels, but you'll find all those channels there.
Right on, right on. For folks listening, I mean, if they've never heard you before, they're probably like, wow, he's got a really nice voice. So there's also information about your audiobook work, your voiceover work there. And I definitely implore people to check out Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. Let's kind of talk about the origins of the show. And, the show wouldn't be complete without your awesome co host, the Moondog Vance. So you want to, I've always been curious, how did you guys first run into each other? How did you guys get connected? And how did it become so clear to both of you that you wanted to do a show together on Gnosticism and Hermeticism?
Well, I'd already been doing the show, but I
Mm.
was just doing it periodically. I was maybe twice a month, sometimes once a month. I was just sharing stuff, and if there was a guest or a book that was out, and Vance was a listener, and he just started emailing me or
Nice.
messaging me about questions about Gnosticism, the show, and we were talking a lot, and then he volunteered for things like engineering the sound and all that, and then probably around 2017 or so, I asked him, well, why don't you help co-host? It'll make it easier. And then eventually the show went full time, if you would. Probably 2018 was when Aeon Byte finally went full time. That's really, I feel, is like the birth of the podcast. I know people are like, well, you're the OG, you've been doing it so long. Yes and no. You know what I mean? Again, there was a time I was just putting it out whenever I felt like, like a blogger. I'll write a blog when I feel like it. But my commitment to Gnosis was really 2018, and Vance was part of that.
That's awesome. Yeah. So in 2018, when this became more of a consistent thing for you, I mean, did that change the way that you approached your podcast and your research? Because it's kind of funny that you bring that up too, because right around the end of 2018, going into 2019, I started working my first gig as a teacher, really a student teacher. And I remember tuning into Aeon Byte. I would download the episodes on Spotify and drive to school and come back, and I got to learn a ton of stuff that no one in that public school could really relate to, as far as I could tell. I found a couple people who I could talk to about this stuff, but I was curious, since 2018 that you've been doing it consistently, and I mean, you guys have been doing awesome work in the roaring 2020s. So, how has that changed for you since you've gone from, kind of like part-time to full-time? How has that felt?
Good. I mean, it was, again, we were talking about things that were derailing me. 2018 was a rough year. A lot of crises were happening, a lot of changes were happening. But at least I'd been doing spirituality and been in Alcoholics Anonymous enough where they say, if you're in a crisis, give it away.
Mm.
If you're going through a bad time, help somebody else. So I had this like urge to increase the exposure of Gnosticism and my ideas. And I had it wasn't really anything like, oh, I'll make more money. That was not even in the radar because I had jobs and other things going
Mm.
on. But suddenly, as I kept putting more and shows out, the viewership just exploded. The subs started coming in. I was like, oh, wow, the people are interested in this stuff. I'll just continue. And the crisis got better and better. And then 2020, yeah, the show really exploded. Somehow, with all the craziness that happened in 2020, people started, waking up, being more curious, looking for alternative ideas, or just realizing that this society that we live is ultimately a construct. It's not real, or it's not realistic, if you would. And the show just kept growing. So I think part of Aeon Byte is that in Gnosticism, does fit a modern culture, and it's definitely resounded with a lot of people. And here we are in 2023, and things are just going to get weirder as far as the eye can see, the third eye can see.
Here we are, Miguel, third eyes wide open. And it's funny. I was visualizing this red pill cafeteria, this phrase that you like to use a lot. And the in 2020, when people were home or not really doing much, maybe the essential workers out there were into podcasting as well. I would hope so. The line for this red pill cafeteria probably stretched on and on, as these breadcrumbs were slowly scattered throughout the mainstream narrative. And something a part of this trail of breadcrumbs is always bringing me back to the hero's journey. And you had mentioned that you've gone through difficult challenges, and I'm curious with the podcast and with some of the guests that you've spoken to, like someone in particular that really stood out to me was Becca Tarnas, and she had talked about Tolkien and the imaginal realm, and how this hero's journey played out in Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. They are so profound and vibrant in our collective consciousness. And I wanted to ask you if you had any takeaways from your conversations with Becca, because those were a couple of my favorite, and I think you guys did a great job with your questions there. What do you think, Miguel?
Yeah, great conversation, and I love her work. And obviously, she leans a lot into Tolkien and Jung. And as you heard from the podcast, Tolkien and Jung had very parallel, similar lives. And this goes to the whole idea, yeah, of mythology, the richness of mythology, how it's the language of the spirit, and the highway into the great unconscious, into the great unknown. There's so much we can say about mythology. But what's great is that individuals like Jung or Tolkien, who changed the world, changed the consciousness of humanity, they never said they were making things up or inventing ideas. They were discovering these new realms. Tolkien was discovering the elven realm, and Jung was discovering the unconscious, and both were creating this sort of new language. The terms they use, because language limits us so much. Often we need to change our language to change our reality. Heidegger is somebody who does it too, but you'll see over and over. I mean, Lewis Carroll is great for creating words because you almost need that language to be able to discover what's on the other side or what's deep within the unconscious of humanity. Tolkien called it the no, that was Henry Corbin called it the imaginal.
Mm.
Again, Tolkien called it the unconscious. Tolkien called it the elven realm, so forth. But it's this sort of again mythic realm that leads to the world of archetypes and the primordial symbols that we all share, the very building blocks of not just consciousness, but perhaps the universe itself. So this is these are great lessons, and it certainly ties right into what the Gnostics were saying 2,000 years ago, and the Hermetics and all. It's that sort of I don't know, magical thinking where we
Mm.
are connect, where we go beyond time and we're all connected and we can see everything at once. Yeah, like the movie. The movie's very Gnostic. And yeah, and what it brings is new innovations, new vistas, wholeness to the human soul, and the defragmenting of both culture and us as individuals. So, in a nutshell, that's what Becca is doing, and she's done great work, and she's really tapping into these great thinkers, and we need their. I feel we need their ideas more than ever.
Right on. Well said. Well said. And there's something that you brought up in relation to Becca's work, and that's creating a sense of wholeness. And for some reason, I immediately thought of Lady Galadriel from the Lord of the Rings. And I think a lot of people are upset. I have to mention this because the Amazon Prime spinoff, is putting a different taste in people's mouths about Lady Galadriel. So let's forget that for a second. The classic mythological elven heroine figure who's actually the reason why I'm asking you about Galadriel in particular is because she seems to be a perfect figure of Sophia in the way that she in the giving of gifts to these hobbits, giving Frodo and Sam and the other fellowship members these gifts, she's able to restore in them some sense of divinity or some spark that keeps them going. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that, or other Sophia like figures that kind of represent this divine wisdom that have been really profound in pop culture.
Good question. Yeah, I mean, obviously Galadriel. I guess I put her closer to the archetype of the queen.
Right, right.
So she's really been well done in that characteristic. I mean, I think with Tolkien, you really don't get Gnostic more in the Silmarillion when he's talking
Mm.
about the creation of the world, and Melkor is he's leaving and he brings back discord because there's a darkness there and whatever, and that's extremely Gnostic. But all these wisdom figures certainly pop up in Tolkien. As far as God, modern culture, there's so many of them. I'm trying to think of one. I don't know if your listeners or viewers have watched Westworld,
Yeah, I have that
but
written down here. Yeah.
Dolores
Mhm.
definitely plays a very Sophianic figure because in the Gnostic Gospel, the divine feminine fragments into different figures. She has many avatars, and
Mm.
one of them is sort of Eve for her mission to rescue the universe from the clutches of the demiurge. And sometimes she forgets who she is. That's definitely a theme you see even in some texts. Jesus forgets who he is. We come down with this
Mm.
mission, and we may be all powerful, but in this world, again, talking about deep, we're going right back to derailing. We forget why we're here. We forget
Exactly.
what we're doing here. It's what did Plato said? All learning is remembering. So
Hmm.
she has to remember her source. She has to remember her pain. She has to put it all together and then find her mission, which is the idea of gnosis, self knowledge, understanding our trauma, understanding how we got here, understanding what our role is, and always understanding that we are part of something bigger and wonderful and artistic and whole.
Mm.
It's not just Jake and Miguel. We are just small parts of something amazing, and we just have to remember that. So for some reason, yeah, Dolores came into my mind. There's that Netflix show, 1899.
Yes, awesome show. So is
Yeah, the
Dark,
main
by the way.
Dark too. Yeah, but I've been slogging through that
Mm.
slowly. I wish the pacing was a little bit better. It's a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
slow, but 1899 again is very good. The main
Hmm.
character, I forgot her name, is she's definitely very Sophianic. So yeah, any
Absolutely.
of these characters who have to remember who they are and their power and all that, you could definitely call them Sophianic. I mean,
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with Dolores Cannon, but I bring her up because it's always interesting when characters have names that are sort of echoing others, or like another TV show that did this directly was Lost because they had characters like Jonathan Locke, or
uh,
Desmond Hume, the other Rousseau, these other characters that were directly alluding to more historical or popular figures like that. So does Dolores Cannon have any particular ideas that stood out to you? Because I think Dolores in Westworld is really cool that she's sort of engineered to forget, and she's derailed just for the fact, just for the sake of that journey to rediscover herself. But is there any relation to Dolores Cannon? I just have to ask because I'm kind of curious.
who is Dolores Cannon?
Okay, well then, it's a bit of a blunder on my part. She sounds familiar. I think she's an author. She might be like a channel of some kind, maybe. I'll have to look that up later. That's a kind of a mental note to myself. But
Yeah,
I'm glad you.
doesn't ring a bell. Oh, and for your
Yeah.
audience, this is not beer. I don't drink. This is
It's a
it's just
caffeinated beverage there. Yeah.
yeah, from
Good stuff.
some small independent place, and but Liquid Death, it's
Liquid
called. Very
Death.
interesting.
Good
Yeah.
stuff. Good stuff. Well, I appreciate that kind of comment on sobriety because it's interesting to think about spirits and the spirits that have infected our culture in a way. And I think some people, if they're listening and they're not too familiar with Gnosticism, they might have an aversion because the things that they've heard about Gnostic tropes and things like that are related to this idea of a prison or of a prison planet. And I've even heard this referred to as like pop Gnosticism, which is sort of like a pipeline to nihilism, where people believe that, there's no hope on this planet. We are like prisoners of the archons. And I was hoping you could dispel this myth for us because, like you say, Miguel, you can live your own gospel and write your own myths. So, how do we change people's minds about the value of Gnostic teachings?
Well, I think these they're not saying anything wrong, but I
Mm.
think as for in more modern speak, you take the red pill, then you have to take the black pill, then you have to take the white pill, and this is very Nietzschean Gnostic. What you stare into the abyss, and this darkness stares into you, but also or fight not ye monsters, lest ye become a monster.
Mm.
But that's part of the process because that's the pruning, that's the complete destruction of your ego and all the programming. And Nietzsche even said, then you grab the rainbow bridge where you create your own aesthetic and you see so much wonder. The Gnostics were definitely toying with existentialism and nihilism, but that was part of the process.
Mm.
It's almost like you have to die to your old self, be born to your new self. And that's not even original in most religions. They tell you that all the time. The programming has to go, the old you has to die, and the new alchemical process from Nigredo to Rubedo, or in alchemy you find it too, has to go on. There is no other choice. In other words, you're looking for complete transformation. In AA terms, what do they always say? You can't get better until you admit you have a
Mm.
problem.
It's number one.
We all we all have a problem. We're addicted to the material world in some way or another, whether it could be good things, our phones, our jobs, our families, and that's fine. If you want to linger in this, linger. But if you want the deep answers to the universe and a deep connection with yourself and an experience that goes beyond belief and a rapture and an ecstasy, well, then, yes, you have to admit that you are in a prison. that you have a problem, that you are a fraud for all practical purposes, you are a construct, everything's a construct, and then you go to the process. Doesn't mean you end up in a cave somewhere or something like that. It just means
Yeah.
your soul is transformed.
Mhm.
As they say, the old saying, before I was enlightened, I chopped wood and gathered water. It's the same thing.
Mhm.
Something within you is permanently changed, and you are no longer of the world, even though you are still in the world. So yes, I have no problem with archons were trapped and all that, and there's no way out. Yeah, play with that. Let it destroy you. Let meet the fear and understand that the only thing behind that fear is just a trauma
Mhm.
of somebody telling you you had to forget and you're not as good as you were supposed to be, and they're trying to just make you conform to the herd. So it's
Yes. I
so that's it.
couldn't agree more. It's like, yeah, the prison is very, very real. I think people approach it without going through the full hero's journey process. They stop at the black pill and then they never progress from there. And I'm thinking back
Yeah.
to,
Well, think of Empire Strikes Back.
yes,
When Luke goes in that cave and he sees the mask of Darth Vader and it breaks him, the horror he went through was existential. I mean, you could
exactly.
see his psyche cracking, but
Mhm.
he had to go through that
Had to.
complete despair so he could become a Jedi and save his father.
That's an
So
excellent point. Yeah, that is really cool. And okay, so you brought up AA as well, and there's always something fascinating about numerology. It's something that I've wanted to study more and more, and I've been trying to look at the Enneagram as well because there's a lot of different ways that numbers can be fashioned, especially like if you study tarot and astrology and connect those and correspond those together. So obviously there's 12 steps. I spoke to someone yesterday about the 12 Knights of the Round Table. Hercules has 12 labors. There's 12 different names for the sun in Hindu. All these 12s, obviously the 12 apostles, or sorry, the 12 zodiac signs, same thing, I guess. But, we basically want to figure out like, is there something in particular that stands out to you about this number 12? Does it connote a certain type of symbolism? Like for the Knights of the Round Table, it's always like a circular kind of structure. Do you see the 12 steps in that kind of way as well?
yeah, I mean it's a primordial number. Most of our numbers we get or their importance from ancient Egyptian, Jews, Babylonians. I mean, 360, the Babylonians were into
Mm.
60. The Egyptians were into decans or tens, but they added extra two to rest. And these things are, yeah, they're part not just of ancient people, but you could say they're close to again, that archetypal image of primordial numbers and symbols
Mm.
that are the building blocks of consciousness. And again, maybe even reality. So, the thing, I mean, Bill W. he was a product of the esoteric movement of the earliest 20th century. He was into William James and into Eastern traditions and all that. So, of course, it would just make sense that he would pick the number 12. He could have gone 11 or whatever. He could have gone 8, but it was going to be 12. And yeah, so these things are just out in the air,
Yeah. Well,
ether, the
in
ether.
the ether, yeah, yeah, yeah. As within, so without, we could say.
Right.
So, I think that's a good segue now because you've got your main show, you and Vance do Aeon Byte, and then there's Finding Hermes, which has sort of a different spin. So Finding Hermes, I mean, Hermes and Mercury are very much aligned, and I like the idea of thinking about Hermes as the squirrel from the Ygritte, the world tree in Norse mythology, the squirrel that runs up and down. Like if you ever read American Gods by Neil Gaiman, he has this wonderful scene. Shadow is the main character. He's basically going through the crucifixion process like Odin did. He's hanging on this world tree, and this squirrel, I think it starts with an R, Ratatok or something like that. It's the messenger of the gods from Asgard to Midgard. And he's bringing down messages. He's like calling him on his bullshit, and it's pretty funny. And that's kind of how I see Mercury and Hermes in a way. But this other show that you got, Finding Hermes. Would you like to give us an introduction and maybe talk about some of the inspirations that led you to create this separate show from Ambite?
Sure. I mean, two-part. One was I wanted to tweak the show or my podcast to help people with well, give them alternative solutions to mental disease, alcoholism, and all that, because in early 2020 things were just, well, people were losing their minds, and people were insecure, and there's a lot of damage from lockdowns and other things. So I wanted, it was my way of helping, if you would. Again, if things get bad, find a way to help somebody else, because your ego dissipates. The other thing too is through listening to some Jungians and other, I realized, oh my God, Hermes is probably the most important god we have in our modern time. All the other gods are pretty much irrelevant compared to him, because this is the age of the trickster, from Trump to the virus to crypto to Elon Musk to war. It seems there is this trickster mentality or force that is soaking the world, and Hermes is the only hope to really get us to the other side, because we have no choice. He's the god of transitions. He's the god of doorways. He's the god of innovation to new vistas and new solutions. And he's the god, of course, of tricks, because I think we have to realize that our mind plays tricks, and this universe is playing tricks. It's the way we navigate it. I mean, he is the most powerful force. So I wanted to do something to honor and to get people to understand that this is the only way we're getting out of this, is if we embrace those Hermetic principles, that also Hermes encompasses: mysticism, magic, divination, everything, astrology, that kind of wild, crazy thing that he did in ancient times. And even this is the year of the rabbit, and the trickster appears in every culture. And there is a story of the rabbit that's just like Prometheus with Native Americans, where the animals vote him to go get fire, and he goes to some camp with some humans and he steals the fire to help all the other animals too. So in these Native American stories, the he's always called the changer, whether he's the coyote, the rabbit, the beaver, and he always comes to you and he tells you things are going to change. Now the problem is, we humans as herd animals, we don't want change. People still want it to be 2019.
Oh,
They won't let
never going
go.
back.
No, but 99% of people in this world still want it to be 2000. And it
Right.
wasn't that great, and it was false, and it was corrupt, but they still want it. But the trickster comes and says, things are going to change. And he'll either change them for you, or he'll make you realize that your reality was never that good, and you are going to change for a better reality. So this force exists, and I think it's so important for us to embrace the trickster, embrace Hermes for all he can do. Hermes is the god of the mind, but we've leaned so much on reason and scientism, and reason is great, but there is so much more that we are: intuition, wisdom, mysticism, the invisible, the imaginal that we're talking about, that place of abstract and metaphysics that really changes human beings. I mean, we're kind of stuck as a species. I mean, most people don't understand that those great scientists we had in the middle and early 20th century, from Einstein to Eisenberg to all they were complete mystics. They were into the tarot, they were into the I Ching, they were into Indian mysticism. They had a Hermetic mind, and they were able to do things like split the atom and create these amazing inventions. Today, everybody's sort of stuck and confused, like, how do we defeat the virus? Oh, which way should we go? What's the best type of,
Yeah.
our leaders are just they're lost. If you notice, they're completely baffled and lost because they don't have Hermes. They don't have that gnosis, and they need to embrace the tricks. Or again, these scientists of the 20th century they were jokers, they were thieves, they were wild people. And we've lost that. We've lost that Hermetic thinking. And this is the age where Hermes is either going to take us to one side, or he's going to drive the entire Western culture batshit crazy, because that's what he does. The changer. If you don't accept his changes, he's going to F you up. Simple as that. I wish I had better news. That's the black pill, but then
Oh
comes the
yeah,
white.
well,
The white pill's great.
just like we were saying, this is Luke Skywalker's like most
Yeah.
important part of his entire journey. We got to go through it. And Miguel, I mean, in a corrupt world that's brought to you by Pfizer and all of this, and everything of that sort. Like, what are the most practical ways that people can embrace this God of transformation? Like, if you were to counsel someone who was so caught up in this cultural craziness, or maybe even their own spiritual craziness, and I guess those are one of the same in the micro and macro, what are a couple things you would recommend to them?
Excuse me. Well, honestly, the answer is always the same, and the answers never change. It's goes right back to the Temple of Delphi. Know yourself. So simple because A, I would tell them you're a fraud, society's a fraud. That's the black pill. You're a lie. Everything you've known is a lie. But guess what? There's something truly deep and amazing and artistic and inventive within you, within each one of us. But the answer is we have to know ourselves
Mm,
because who we are, Jake, Miguel, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath, there's a vast ocean of the unconscious, of all these archetypes we've talked about, and Hermes himself, they're all there. There's also our trauma, our shadow, which wants a seat at the table. That's you brought up King Arthur. That's been my metaphor. Simple as like all who we are, our trauma, our pain, everything, our shadow wants a seat at King
mm,
Arthur's table, not to destroy us, again, Luke, but to teach us, to be heard, to understand, so that we can become full and whole. And when we do that, each one of us is unstoppable. We find our true purpose, our true call. The world no longer affects us because we know who we are and what our destiny is. It could be small, could be big. Not all of us will be presidents or movie stars. Some of us will find joy in taking care of animals or
mm.
working at a soup kitchen or maybe being a teacher, an engineer, whatever. But it's unique for each one of us, and we are free and we are individuated. So that's my thing. Is the answer is always know yourself, go deep within, go deep into that adventure, that cave. The frustrating thing is because is when I talked about Gnosticism is that there's no listicle, there's no
Right.
formula because the Gnostics were anarchists and they said, well, everybody's different. You can't
Mm,
give you a list of if you do this and this, you'll do this and this. You have to find out what works for you. I mean, I like I have my practices, DreamWorks, entheogens, meditation, I Ching, but Jake might you might need something else. You might need
right, right.
ceremonial magic or
There's
biking
no
or
one size fits all
right. And
treatment.
that's
Yeah.
where people freak out. They look at you like because again, we are herd animals. We want
Yeah.
to do this and you'll be fed. It's like no, you got to go in and you got to find out what works for you, and what works for you might not work tomorrow. You got to
Yeah.
again think of Hermes, the trickster. You're one step ahead of the
Yep.
archons. You're one step ahead of the trickster god. So that's what I would say. No matter what time we are, just know yourself. Know
Mm, know
yourself.
yourself.
That's never changed. Jesus
Right.
says it. Buddha, it's the answer to life, to everything.
That's the answer that's true today. It was true yesterday. It'll be true if people listen to this 100 years from now. It'll be this.
But yeah, but that's the one thing we spend our lives doing is not knowing ourselves.
Mm.
Oh, I'll watch TV. I'll act like this guy.
Well,
Oh,
let
my
me ask
parents
you
told me to
about
be
that
this.
because I had a question from a friend who it's about Jung and it's about Alan Dulles and the CIA. And I really respect Carl and I think Jung's ideas, especially because they were disseminated through Jordan Peterson. That's how I first found out about Jung. They
Right.
were presented in a very practical way. And say what you want about Dr. Peterson. I think he should delete Twitter. That's just me, but if he keeps writing books and just does his lectures, he's a great
And get
individual.
and
Yeah.
get back more to Jung instead of bitching about things. Yeah, on the
Yeah, yeah,
internet.
right, right. So
Talk
but
about
anyway,
Jung.
yeah. So with Jung, I'm sure you've heard of this connection to Alan Dulles and the CIA. And I know that the Nag Hammadi texts were discovered the same year that the CIA was formed. And the question from my friend, is kind of interesting because this is relating to, well, here's the problem. This is the black pill, but like, where did this start? And it seems like perhaps it's possible. I'm speculating. I'm curious if you have done any looking into this. That the collective consciousness work that Carl has put forth, that Jung has popularized, could have been weaponized in some particular way, and maybe this was
Oh, no
disseminated through
doubt.
television.
No
Right?
doubt.
What do you think about
Oh
all
yeah.
that?
Yeah, no doubt about that. Well, first, yeah, the Nag Hammadi was discovered in 1945, so the CIA came after that. But
Okay.
when the bombs were dropped, but yeah, Alan Dulles, his mistress, was was a patient of Jung, and he
Oh.
started eavesdropping, and I think he had a conversation. But yeah, he definitely weaponized. You could almost say MK Ultra was thanks Papa Jung for you gave these powers. But unfortunately, that's the way the world works.
Mm,
Is anything that can be weaponized will be weaponized. Everything casts a shadow. Jung casts a shadow. Gnosticism casts a shadow.
Tesla.
Yeah, everything casts a shadow, and these things can be used by the powers and principalities and the rulers of this age to manipulate for dark things. I mean, Edward Bernays was what he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud,
Mm,
and Sigmund Freud and Jung's ideas of the unconscious and symbol that's what drives us. It's not our ego; it's these unconscious powers that was weaponized too, and that's been used against us. So there's no doubt about that. But again, that's where self knowledge comes because we are being manipulated. We have these things within us, and when we understand that they've twisted Jung's ideas against us for decades for all these horrible social engineering programs, we can use that against them or inoculate ourselves, vaccinate ourselves so it no longer works and use the light side of Jung for to discover what's within us. So yeah,
I
did
like
I answer
that.
your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's good because again, we're thinking about like some of the sources of these spiritual troubles could be coming from the programming, the constant barrage
Yeah.
from the algorithm.
I'll even go further and say that, and this has been done by scholars, that
Mm,
even Nazism and communism is a form of weaponized Gnosticism.
mm,
I'll even grant of that because the power of the Gnostics and the Hermetics was pretty big, and if you could use that for the wrong reasons, warp it, change a few things,
mm.
you can get control of most of humanity. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's everything casts a shadow. Jung had a big shadow. You and I have big shadows. We
Right.
know we are capable of terrible things to other human beings and to ourselves. It's just the nature of the universe. It's
Mm.
neither good or bad. It's just
It's just the way we are. Yeah, that's our
yeah.
well, there's a really interesting article on your website one more time. That's thegodabovegod.com. There's the in the front of it, right? The God above God.
Correct.
Um on the blog you talked about mannequin how do you say that? Manichaeanism.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Forgive me.
Oh, that's okay.
It was interesting. I kind of want to read the first blurb, and then maybe you can talk about what prompted you to write this because this was uh
I think
so
that's a guest writer. Does
oh,
it
it's a
say a guest?
guest writer. Yeah, it says Manichaeans, the religion of the call.
Yeah. By
Interesting too
yeah,
because it's
Alexander, and he's a great. He wrote a great book. He was Belly of the Beast. He was
mm,
he is a Russian Jew that was persecuted. He left Soviet Russia and moved to Israel, and now and he's very much into Gnosticism. So he writes these great books and articles on the Gnostic. He thinks they've got the solution to counter and he talks about the corruption in Israel and the corruption in
mm,
Russia and all that. So he's
yeah.
been in the belly of the beast, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I bring it up because it kind of relates to, this concept that we've been kind of discussing. It's he says in the intro blurb, today the concept of Manichaeanism is perhaps the most frequently used in political and cultural debate. It means extreme dualism,
Mm,
radical division, and polarization in which the forces of light are engaged in a death struggle with the forces of darkness. And it seems to be
yeah.
like the ongoing, ever present conflict. And we see this in shows like Westworld, where there's the black hats and the white hats. And I was wondering if you wanted to comment on some of the cults because well, like some of them are maybe not cults exactly, but they're grouped together in cults. I think the most obvious one to start with is Scientology, and the history of this phenomena, especially in Los Angeles of all places.
Yeah,
So
very,
let's
very Gnostic religion. I'll admit
yeah.
that. I mean, in fact, L. Ron Hubbard, it was on purpose. He used to, you can find memos and letters where he said, "We are a Gnostic religion," referred to this as Gnosis. Obviously, the mythology of Scientology. We fall into these. We are alien state at Xeno, and the evil Xeno threw us into this planet, and we're really aliens that need to wake up. So yeah, weaponized Gnosticism right there.
Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, Gnostic too. Yeah, we are trapped in these bodies, and we need to leave these bodies because the Gnostics were into ecstatic astral projection kind of rituals. They believed they could travel the stars and go beyond. So yeah, of course, the problem that a lot of these make a huge mistake. Again, they use all of it. Is that to the Gnostics, the Hermeticists, our advantage is that we are both human and divine. We have something that gods don't have. We have something animals don't have. So our goal is not to escape this universe or control it. Is to become fully human and fully divine, and that's the problem they always miss. You can't just leave the universe. You got to be fully human and then help others. The texts of the
Exactly.
ancient Gnostics are all about healing people, creating potions and scrolls, and helping people heal physically and mentally too. You are to be Jesus, or as I call them, Christian bodhisattvas, and you are to help humanity. That's really it. Again, know yourself and all that,
Yes.
but everything else, there's no utopia in Gnostic text. There's no better society. It starts and ends with your role as a person helping others, and talks about helping animals, helping nature, helping everybody. So a lot of this has been warped to,
Warped.
or just misunderstood, which is
Yeah.
fine. I mean, that's
Oh,
life.
that's the fun part too, is that once things get warped, once things are inverted, it's the discovery. It's just like we were saying with Dolores, she gets to rediscover herself. She completely forgets who she is. It's also like that last season of Lost. People forget that they were on this island, and they forget that they had those experiences. They connected with these people, and then they're all reunited once again. And the last cult on this list, I got this from your website. I thought it
Yeah,
was very clever.
that's my article, because I'm
Yeah,
like, I lay it all on the table. I have nothing.
yeah. I got kind of a good laugh out of this because I never considered this to be grouped as a cult. And you said Gnostic cults for better or for worse. One of them was A Course in Miracles, and it gave me a little bit of a chuckle because I kind of saw that as like an innocent body of wisdom, but I never really dove into it myself in detail. Probably just watched a couple YouTube summaries about it. But can
Well,
you tell us more about that?
Marianne Williamson. We have a big Gnostic who's ran for president and all that. But yeah, it's in A Course of Miracles. And my aunt, she's been studying A Course of Miracles for like 40 years. And
Hmm.
I went to Portugal last summer, and she's like, "How can you compare Gnosticism to Course in Miracles?" And I showed her the evidence, and she's like, "Oh shit, you are right." Because it does start, Gnosticism has a simple explanation. It's a story of how God went crazy and became us.
Hmm.
Again, like Dolores, something
Right.
happened and God lost his mind, and he thought he was human, and he started worshiping the wrong things, the God of the Bible, money, all that. And of course, the Miracles has the same cosmology where it talks about God had one crazy thought.
Hmm.
He had like that glitch, that little, and suddenly he became human and he became us. And Jesus is his way of sort of teaching God how to get back to the source. But Course in Miracles and Gnosticism, it's all pretty much a simulation, or what they say, the only real thing is God's love. Everything else is, maybe it's real, but it's really irrelevant at the end of the day, because God's love is all that matters.
Hmm.
And through a sort of intellectual, contemplative, meditative process of knowing ourselves, we can join the source. So, and that's just a few examples, but Course in Miracles and Gnosticism are very parallel. Obviously, A Course in Miracles doesn't take the stance that there are archons out there. Gnosticism is very different than most perennial religions and most New Age religion, or even alternative religions that have kind of, I think, made the mistake of saying there's no evil. The Gnostics were like, look, they're coming at us, Agent
Right.
Smith, and
Yeah.
the strangers from Dark City, the
Hmm.
demons, they are out there and they are coming for us. And I think that's a mistake, which makes no sense, because, as my friend Gordon White has said, 99% of cultures in this planet believe in evil spirits.
Mm.
Somehow we Westerners in modern times, oh, there's no evil. It's just, that's, but
Our science can deny the all that. Yeah.
religion, yeah, no, there are things that go bump in the night. They want to fuck you up big time.
Yes,
No
sir.
doubt about it.
That is true. Unfortunately, I've experienced that myself, but I feel like
Yeah.
as you go deeper down that rabbit hole, you kind of realize that your ability to recognize when you're running into Agent Smith or into something more benevolent. I think that's the
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
journey, whether it's through Christ consciousness or Krishna consciousness or the film of ayahuasca through your third eye. It's pretty interesting that you're always going to encounter the darkness or the light. And I wanted to ask you. This is kind of for fun. I've never done this before. I'm hoping this will be a cool experiment that I can try. So, this is the first time I've ever asked someone to do this on a podcast, and I think it'll be fun. I gathered a list of Gnostic films and TV shows. Some of them came from your website, which we've already spoken on West World. I think we touched on the Matrix vis-a-vis, the red pill, etc. But I'm gonna read a title. I was wondering if you could, in a few words, maybe point out, summarize, clarify, or declare some of the themes that relate to Gnosticism, or even just words that come up. Think of this as like free association, thinking of Jung, and his contributions here. So let's start with a classic, Wizard of Oz.
Yes, yes. We would have to say is Gnostic. I mean, there is an argument to make that the fall of Sophia Gnosticism, this part of God that falls into the world, is Plato's soul high adventure. That the soul has no choice but to rebel or fall into the world because that's just part of the lesson. Whether the material world is a gym, a school, or a prison, your mileage may vary. I don't know, but so things like the Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland
Mm,
certainly show us that Gnostic because both figures fall into this very strange world with these dark forces trying to harm them, and they have to go and sort of learn about themselves and complete the mission to go rejoin to the real world. So yeah.
nice. And since you brought up Plato, I was gonna ask you this originally earlier. I forgot to circle back to this, but I remember being I think I was like 22, 23 years old when I first read Plato's Cave in like a college philosophy class. And that was my first experience consciously with Gnosticism, knowing that there was this sort of proverbial prison. Someone breaks out and sees the other side and then comes back and they're totally rejected. They're like, no, you're crazy. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I always tell people, yeah, that's the first version of the Matrix.
yes, exactly. Exactly. Unplug yourself. So now we've got Fight Club. What a classic. Awesome book, too.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I have an article on that. I think it's
Mm,
very Gnostic because it does deal with the simulation, how fake the world is, and this character is fragmented and has to rejoin his lower self and higher self, his daemon, and go through all these challenges. Marla plays the Sophia or Eve character
mm,
because she's the one that sparks this awakening. He's sort of lost and he lives in the material world and then he goes to the psychic world because the Gnostics always divided the human into spiritual, mental, and material.
mm,
Edward Norton Jr. He's first like trying to buy stuff and for his house, and he'll be complete and he's material. Marla then he goes into all these meetings where he's pretending he's dying, but he finds this mental uh help and he finds this wholeness in his mind. And then Marla is a Sophia character or trickster character because in the Gnostic Gospels, Jesus and Sophia are definitely tricksters and sparks all this disturbance and oh my God, the
mm.
black pill. And then eventually he meets his higher self, which is Tyler Durden, and it's their journey of integration into wholeness. And at the end, the material world sort of collapses around
Yes.
Sophia. He plays sort of the Christ Sophia figure, the male, female,
Right. Right.
wisdom and logos, if you would.
Wisdom and logos. in that last scene, it's very reminiscent of the Twin Towers. And I know you did a great interview about 9/11, and I'm curious, if there was, if you like the directors of Fight Club or the author Chuck Palahniuk. I don't know if this was intentional. If this was, I mean, I think it clearly was. Like it, that imagery is unforgettable. And yet it seems like the whole story, like on the surface of Fight Club, had nothing to do with world trade and with material. Well, it did have to do with material goods. The things that you own end up owning you. But why do you think they ended with such a provocative scene of those towers collapsing like that?
Well, that's always going to be the mystery. That's where we get into the realm of synchromysticism, where
Mm-hmm.
our collective unconscious or the spirit world or whatever is giving us clues before they happen, like the Mothman warning you before there's a tragedy.
Right.
It's again, Mothman is a trickster, our unconscious is a trickster because. I mean, in the Matrix, you've got Neo, where that famous scene in the movie was 1999, where he whips out his passport and the expiration date is 9/11, 2001. I mean, there's so much of these hints that were coming. There was that Mel Gibson movie, The Patriot,
Right.
which came out where he's weighing a chair and it's exactly 9 pounds and 11 ounces. You see that over and
The Big
over
Lebowski
happening.
does it too, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much. So you have to put it in the realm of synchromysticism
Mm,
where the universe or whatever you want to call it is warning us or showing us a future and we have to sort of hopefully figure it out. That's
yeah.
the job of the
Yeah.
shaman, the artist, the conspiracy theorist, or as I followed what Jimmy Dore calls it, is you can't call them conspiracy theories, you got to call them spoiler alerts because
Spoiler alerts. Just give them
they're
a few months and you'll see.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's coming right down. If we'd known in 1999, if
Mm,
we'd been more awake, we would have figured out that 9/11 was coming.
yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, there's a couple I didn't get to, and I just want to read them for people who are into Gnosticism and want to access a couple pop culture references that are definitely vetted and very highly regarded. That would be Twin Peaks, True Detective, and the last one of my favorites, Altered Carbon. They're all excellent
Yeah.
shows. Yeah.
First season of Altered Carbon could come
Mm,
out from a Philip K. Dick novel, and Philip K.
exactly.
Dick was very influenced by Gnosticism, both in his experiences and his interests as a person. So yeah, watch that, understanding about fragmented consciousness, false realities. True Detective is a great Manichaean tale because it is about these powers of light and darkness and how this figure, again, he's obviously Russ comes from the pessimist existential school of philosophy, very dark, everything, so, the whole world is a gutter into outer space and
Mm,
all that. But he has his moments of gnosis and Satori, and at the end, he does that famous the light is starting to win. He's
nice.
awakened. He sees so much Gnosticism in that one, and of course Twin Peaks. That just especially when you watch the third season, The
Well, I have a
Return.
quick question, Miguel. So I brought this one up, Twin Peaks. This is the one that I've actually never seen. So instead of could you give me like maybe your trailer for it? Like if you were gonna convince someone to watch Twin Peaks, what
Oh,
would
I
you
wouldn't.
what would be your endorsement?
I don't. It's like when
No,
people. I always tell people, don't even go down the path of
don't even do it.
Gnosticism. Just go away. Go away. Which is it?
Go outside.
Zen Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, or Buddhism in general is like Gnosticism and Buddhism are like the same religion in many ways. They're brother sisters. They're like these parasitical, rebellious religions that tell you everything's wrong. But and of course in Buddhism, there's that thing where you go to the temple and then they tell you we can't teach you shit. Get out of here. You see that in Fight Club where they make them stand in the rain and all that. So I always tell people just don't go there. Awakening is the best thing that'll happen, but most people aren't ready for it. Just
That sounds
enjoy
fair.
your
Yeah.
iPhone. Enjoy your iPhone and video
Enjoy
games.
it. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There's a lot out there that we could consume, and sometimes the best thing is to just go outside and get some sunshine. I think that's ancient wisdom that is forgotten very easily because of all these screens and these distractions. But going in a different direction as we wrap up. It's been about an hour, and this has been fun. But I still have a question from a friend, maybe a couple, but this one really stuck out, and he was curious about the Cathars and about how there was a theory put forth that the Cathars, their prophecy, their teachings were false. I will admit I don't fully understand the full context. I didn't really dive into the Cathars too closely. I've heard them in mention in passing, but for the sake of the questions and the request, I gotta ask you, Miguel. Is there anything you want to say about the Cathars and their relationship to Gnosticism and how some have called their ideas false?
Well, yeah, I mean the church has always called anything Gnostic false.
Heresy.
That goes without, yeah, heresy. That goes without saying. But the Cathars were a medieval sect in probably 12th, 13th century that was brutally suppressed in southern France. Dan Brown talks a lot about them in the Da Vinci Code, and they held this view that it was Gnostic, that this world was not ruled by the demiurge or the archons, but it was ruled by Satan. By then, Satan takes the place of the Bond villain instead of the demiurge, and that we needed to again find this sort of special self knowledge to wake up to this reality that was false, and we could escape this universe while helping others escape this universe too. They were very much into Mary Magdalene, which is always big Gnostic. The Knights Templar built all their castles to honor Mary Magdalene. That's always a hint that it's Gnostic because the Gnostics saw Mary Magdalene as one of their leaders, a Sophianic figure, a bringer of gnosis. So the Cathars lived in that time, and most people don't realize that they lived in southern France, and there was this war of the church and other nobles to exterminate them in southern France. It was successful. Most people don't know that the Inquisition actually started with the Cathars. It was created to suppress the Cathars, and then it moved on to Jews, witches, whatever boogeyman you could find.
Yeah.
The problem that you have with certain scholars is that they say that the Cathars never existed, that they were actually just sort of rebellious Catholics who had their own ideas, like reincarnation and all this other stuff. And that's been an idea that scholars have put out. I don't agree with it. It's more of an American scholar thing. European scholars pretty much see the Cathars as their own group, definitely somehow influenced by the Manichaeans or other Gnostic groups that just ended up in southern France. And I understand some of the arguments because we have to remember one of the lies we've been told is that the Catholic Church had some iron-fisted control over Europe. But even in the 12th century, the Catholic Church was more of a group of franchises, and it didn't have that much power. Like most people say, in the 12th century, the time of the Cathars, you went to church maybe once a month. You could still worship pagan gods. It was a very different church, but then it decided around then that it wanted to consolidate power and become more centralized. And the Cathars were one victims because they had such control. They were so anarchist. There was a lot of money and resources in southern France, so they had to be wiped off the slate. But when you look at and it's hard because a lot of what the Cathars believed and said is through Catholic priests and scholars saying that. We don't have any existing writings of the Cathars. Oh, we do have, but again, it's given to us by the church. But if you look at those writings, their rituals, their cosmology, it's extremely Gnostic and certainly an antithesis of whatever the church was trying to teach then. Like again, reincarnation. They rejected the Old Testament. They believed this world was run by Satan. They were strictly vegetarians. How the world was created is very similar to what the Gnostics were writing 2,000 years ago, over and over again. So I would be on the camp that the Cathars were truly their own group. And yes, they were rejected by the church.
I can see why people would think that they didn't exist because history is written by the victors. And, if the Inquisition happened the way that we're taught that it actually happened, then, they would have been kind of scrubbed from that story. You know, the winners of this battle, this war to eradicate, to exterminate all the heretics. You know, they probably would have written a different story. And it's pretty interesting. I mean, it's definitely a bit provocative to hear, you know, that the devil runs the earth, and that, you know, that's things are not just love and light like the new agers say. And, you know, my friend Chance from Interverse Podcast says it's the new cage. I think that's a really well way to put it, because it's an incomplete view, and we have to, you know, we have to accept the complete picture, the full yin and yang structure of this existence. And you know, I think you do a great job laying that out in your telling of these stories on your podcast, and when you interview guests. You know, you're able to tap into something syncretic. Like, we're not just focusing we're not just focusing on like Christian mythology. You know, there's Buddhist teachings, there's you've mentioned Rumi a few times, and I think you've alluded to this quote that, you know, we are the entire ocean in one single drop. And I really like that. And I think, you know, between what you're doing on Aeon Byte and Finding Hermes, I think you're offering a lot of hope for people in a world that is a bit lost, I would say. But in the same way, you know, just like Dolores, we're lost only to find we're only lost to be found again. And I wanted to ask you about Aeon Byte, about Finding Hermes, and about your books as well. You know, your own work. I think you had recently. I don't know if recent is a relative term. You put out a book on meditation, right? It was like a daily meditation practice. Any other
Yeah,
work you want to share, and, you know, tell us about this meditation book. That sounds very interesting.
it was just a small book. Again, it was during 2020, 2021.
Okay.
It's called 10 Snackable Meditations,
Mm,
because I learned from AA and other places. Sometimes you need some quick tools.
mm.
I mean, you know, you're at work, you're with family on Thanksgiving. You can't just, I'm going to go meditate for an hour or walk, or I'm going to walk nature,
Right.
or do some ayahuasca on the spot, or whatever you do.
Mm,
So sometimes you need these little mantras or mental tricks or things that work. And these things have worked throughout time. So there's tricks from Tibetan Buddhism, from St. Augustine, from New Agers, from all these disciplines, and you can find maybe something that you can use to help you out when you just like, oh, until I can get home and, you know, unwind with some nice mental practice, this will get you through the day. So that, again, it was part of my kind of Finding Hermes vibe. How can I help others in these time when everybody's struggling mentally and spiritually and all that? So, and I have some fiction books that I've written, and a couple books called the Voices of Gnosticism
yes.
books, which are transcripts of some of my past guests, like the translators of the Nag Hammadi Library, Bart
Mm.
Ehrman, Elaine Pagels, experts on Philip K. Dick and Carl Jung and William Blake, sort of giving them their take. So you can find those books on the site.
Right on, right on. And quick question before we wrap it up. You know, we had talked about Dante's Inferno last year in April, and we had thought about the fact that Dante was a victim of cancel culture. And, you know, we can think of Socrates in the same way. We can think of Christ. I was wondering if there were any other characters, archetypes, or, well, not archetypes, but, you know, characters in the public forum, whether they be modern or ancient. Who else do you think has been canceled that maybe we should pay attention to? And the reason why I'm asking this, Miguel, is because I'm kind of inspired to put this all together, and maybe you can help me. Maybe we can work on this together. It's almost like a quote unquote brief history of cancel culture, starting with Christ and Socrates, all the way to I don't know, someone in the modern day that's speaking truth, like the Project Veritas guy, something like that. You know,
Oh man, this,
uh,
yeah, there's so many. I think the way to go, and I've talked to this with Robert Price and
mm,
Charles Eisenstein, is look at the archetype of the sacred scapegoat.
mm,
Somebody has to carry the sins of the society.
Klaus
Somebody,
Schwab,
yeah, well, somebody, we put our shadow onto
right?
people, and then we send them out. And if we kill them or marginalize them somehow, we feel better. So following that archetype is very important. but you see that so much in history. I mean, also true, the trickster always exists in the liminal places. He's always just outside of society. He's on his own. He's doing his thing, and that either makes people jealous or they want to destroy him. So you can see that with the like Loki. Loki's always,
Mm,
sometimes it's not fair. Sometimes he just
yeah.
gets, I think when he gets hung on the cave or whatever, I think the Sandman did that. He really didn't do
Oh,
anything
that's a
wrong.
good
I
show
forget the,
too. Yeah.
yeah. I think he did something, he didn't do something wrong. And you see that. So, yeah, think of the trickster, the
How about
sacred scapegoat,
Dionysus?
Dionysus. I just see that on top of my head. I mean, we can think of Muhammad.
Oh,
Muhammad.
yes.
Muhammad was just talking, telling people about what the angel Gabriel told him, and he's running for his life.
Yeah. How dare he?
Yeah, Moses, not so much because Moses got also, yeah, he killed an Egyptian and ran away,
Hmm.
but he also was, you could say that too. He's very Dionysian when you look at the whole thing too. What else has been canceled? We usually with founders of religions.
Hmm.
L. Ron Hubbard would like to think because he ran off on his boat
Right,
to
right.
because he was afraid of Jack Parsons, and oh my God, he had to start his religion. So that, yeah, that's been going on with those forces. You really will find again the sacred scapegoat, this person everybody wants to make the villain. I mean, people want to make Jordan Peterson the villain too,
Yeah, I was
because
gonna say.
half of what he says is not that big of a deal.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Twitter is just really good for shadow
You
projection.
just
It's
gotta go
like,
clean your room, bro.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But Twitter will make it's always angry at a
Yeah.
certain amount. I mean, even like Susan Sarandon or
Oh my
something.
God.
You
Yeah.
know, they make it's shadow projection. We want to
Mm.
put our sins on somebody, and if that person goes away, it'll be better. Like for example, people thought, well, if we just get rid of Trump, everything will be fine. I'm like, what do you? Of course not.
Mm.
It's almost people are crazier without Trump. They have no. Who are we going to blame? Who are we going to put a blame
Hindsight,
for this?
hindsight. Yeah. Well, I actually listened to your Charles Eisenstein interview today. I thought it was really cool. I wrote down, maybe I'm paraphrasing here. It's something about when hope dies, the imagination must live on. Is that paraphrasing? What was that? I can't really remember
I
the
don't
full
remember.
context.
Like, it's one of those internet sayings. It's like, you read it while you're scrolling down your
Yeah.
wall, and I
Yeah.
hate it because I want to give credit to this person, but yeah, where hope dies, imagination must live. I always tell people get rid of hope, or what do you call it,
Mm,
hopium,
hopium. Yeah.
because yeah, I mean, in the
Hope and
myth of
cope.
yeah, in the myth of Pandora, when she opens the jar and all these evils come to torture humanity because Zeus wants to punish humanity, at the bottom of the jar is the greatest of all the evil things created. That's hope. Because
Mm,
hope makes us think that there's some great future instead of looking within us right now and seeing what we can do right now. So I always just, yeah, don't worry about hope. Switch that with enthusiasm. Faith is better than hope because faith means you're leaning on the
mm.
spirits and the gods and all that. So yeah, don't get away from hope. In fact, yeah, and was it Prometheus was the Titan of foresight, and he's a very trickster Gnostic god because he defies Olympus, steals the
Oh,
fire,
yes.
all that. He does it with Athena. Again, we get the Logos, Sophia characters doing this work. But his brother is Epimetheus, and that means silly hope. And he's the one that does all these stupid things, like he's the one that opens the jar in some stories of Pandora. The Greeks were like saying, don't stick to hope. I know we've been all programmed to believe it's a wonderful attitude. Believe me, your imagination's far better than hope.
Oh yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And last question before we wrap up. You had asked Charles Eisenstein what his definition of love is, and I won't repeat it here. I think people should go and listen to your chat with him. You actually had a cool double header. It was I think it was Charles Eisenstein and then Mitch Horowitz afterwards. So that was cool.
Right,
That was
right.
a nice dual double header episode there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Lots of good content, but um it's a cool question that came up this morning because I was listening to it as I was driving around running errands today. And I have a friend who's studying the symposium, going back to do a deep dive. And that is a discussion on the definition, the meaning of love in 7 or 8 different ways. 8 or 9 people are discussing their version. So I think it's a cool question. would you like to offer as brief or as strung out as you would like? What does love mean to you, Miguel?
What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Baby, don't hurt me. Yeah. I always tell people love is just a destruction of time
Mm,
because when we lift the veil of time, there is no then, now, there is no me, you. We are all suddenly connected in the same plane and we're united and everything is happening at once. So to me, that's love. And that's my definition. I agree with Charles. Some things you want to leave some ambiguity with or say it in a poetic way, a metaphoric way, because there's no real, yeah. I mean, obviously, with the Greeks, it's like there were, different types of love, nomadic love and brotherly love and
mm.
friendly love, and then eros and all that. But that's a definition that works for me, the destruction of time.
The destruction of time. Well, that's a very unique answer, and I think it's cool to bring up, the Saturn Chronos connection there because that's something that people don't really associate with love, but I think that's a really cool way to put it, and I appreciate that very much. And so, Miguel, what's coming up for Aeon Byte? Where can people get access to these wonderful episodes? What do you have to offer for the plus members and the academy? There's a lot going on your website. So, what
Yeah, yeah.
messages do you want to leave for our wonderful listeners tonight?
Yeah, just I mean the podcast, at least the half of it or the first hour they can find on any podcatcher that's out there, whether it's iHeartRadio or Spotify, whatever it is, you'll find it. But if you want more, go and sub. There's different ways to subscribe, that is. And there's different ways if you want to learn Gnosticism. I have my books, but I have just opened this last December the virtual Alexandria Academy, where you can subscribe or you can just buy these shows one-time payment for life, and you get like 30 videos on the different Gnostic texts, ideas, characters from Simon Magus to the Gnostic Jesus, the different Gnostic sects and what their rituals are, what their magic was. So yeah, go to the site. There's probably something that will speak to you if you want to learn about Gnosticism. I have intro videos and articles. It's all there. Again, sort of a Frankenstein monster that sort of has been happening and evolving as time goes by.
Well said, my friend. Well, as far as Frankenstein's monster goes, it's definitely a creation that has come to life fully, and there's no going back after this. It's totally out there,
Uh,
and I can speak
and it's
for
a very
myself.
Gnostic tale.
Yes, it is.
Frankenstein
Yes,
monster is very
yes,
Gnostic.
yes. Well, I could speak for myself. I think I could speak for a few others in saying that, we definitely appreciate what you've been doing, and you and Vance are fantastic. I'm so happy to look forward to your next episode. I was listening to Eisenstein, like I said, today, and tomorrow I'll dive into another. And I just want you to keep on doing what you're doing. You definitely are appreciated, Miguel. What you've been doing for the podcasting community is much appreciated, and just want to thank you again for being an inspiration for so many others. And thanks for coming on Local Listens, man. I appreciate it.
Enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, man. Talk soon.